Mhm.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Lisa Jarrett, and I am one of the co-founders and co-directors of KSMoCA, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School Museum of Contemporary Art. I'm joined today by my colleague, Harold Fletcher, my founder and my co-founder and co-director, and also Amanda Lee Evans, who is one of our primary collaborators. It's our pleasure to welcome the artist Guadalupe Rosales to our lecture series. This is the last lecture series of the 2020 year, and we're really delighted to have this artist share their work with you today. We also have Carlos Reynoso with us, who is an MFA student in the Art and Social Practice program here at Portland State University, who was kind enough to invite Guadalupe. And then we have Mo, who will be introducing Guadalupe to us in just a few moments. So I'm going to turn it over to Carlos and ask Carlos to share a little bit of information about what was interesting to him about Lupe's work. And then I will turn it over to Mo so that we can learn a little bit about Guadalupe before they present. Carlos.
Thank you so much. Gracias, Lisa. And gracias, Guadalupe, for being here. I'm a huge fan of your work. My name is Carlos Reynoso. I was born in Mexico, grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm up here. I've been up here in Portland for a couple of years. I'm in my third and final year of the MFA program at Portland State. It's an art and social practice. And I, the As third years, we invited Guadalupe to come and talk about her work. Um, uh, I I've been following Guadalupe's work for a couple of years. I have her book, Map Points. It's really good, which she'll go into in detail in a bit. But I love Guadalupe's methodology in storytelling and archiving cultural, like storytelling through collective of archival materials. That's how I've been inspired to do some of the work myself while in the MFA program. Again, thank you so much for being here. Your project, Map Points, really inspired me because it kind of was snapshots of my own family. My cousins, who are in their late 30s and early 40s, were very much so part of that subculture that you talk about in Map Points. So seeing those images and seeing that work, it was like a family, like seeing like my own family, my own story. So it was very powerful for me. So thank you so much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I wanted to make sure to offer a warm welcome to our Dr. MLK Junior School students who are joining us on the YouTube live channel. And I also wanted to make sure to offer our gratitude and thanks to the whole Dr. MLK Junior School community for your ongoing support of our project, specifically Jill Sage, the school principal, Nancy Rios, Michelle Peak, and Paige Thomas, who was kind enough to gather some questions for the artist today, which we'll hear at the end of the talk. And Mo, would you like to welcome Guadalupe and tell us a little bit about her work?
Hi, I'm Mo, and today I'm going to be introducing um, Guadalupe, Roseanne Guadalupe. Guadalupe Rosales. She is from Eastern Los Angeles, California. She is the founder and operator of Vetranas and Rucas and Map Points, two digital archives on Instagram. Roseanne Rosales also runs archives with vernacular photographs, flyers, magazines, and more than are connected to Latinx youth culture in Southern California. Roseanne Rosales uses her art to tell the stories of communities often missing from political public records and official memories by preserving artifacts. Rosales shows us history that get left out. People get to represent who they are themselves. Welcome, Guadalupe. Thank you for being here today at KSMoCA.
Thank you, Mo. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me this morning. Thank you, Carlos. Really appreciate it. So I guess like even talking about my work gets somewhat complex, because I've always considered the work that I do, and also I guess like storytelling as something that is not linear. It's more like this constellation, because there's all these voices included. It's not just my own. But I'll start, just giving you a like, I guess, like the my own personal story and the background of how everything manifested for me. I grew up in East LA, and East LA is known for I guess Latino communities. Maybe people will consider minorities living in East LA. So when I was growing up, my understanding of my community, my neighborhood, was the pride, the represented, the empowerment around that. Like, it just felt rich in culture, which is also, like it was immersed in me, my family, the way I socialized, how the music I listened to. So I guess like when I stepped out of my own culture and community, I started to learn all these words and languages around, communities being represented as like the underrepresented or the marginalized or the minorities. So I'm going to be going back and forth, because there's something that's happening with the work that I'm doing that feels also like I'm also learning from it. There's also like new discoveries, So back to, growing up in East LA, my life in East LA was very complex, like just like any teenager. I had my best friends. I hung out with my school friends after school, and I socialized on the weekends with them, and it was really exciting. At the same time, there was also, this is like early 1990s. It's the peak of gang and state violence. It's not the first time, but it's, this is what's happening around me as well. And in 1996, I lose, my cousin to gang violence. And although I had lost other people, friends that I grew up with, that one was like probably like the hardest blow. So then maybe like 4 years after that had happened, I ended up moving out of LA. I left to New York. And when I did that, I don't know, I feel like I'm always wrestling with this idea, like consciously or subconsciously, detaching myself, like wanting to start from the beginning, from scratch. And I ended up moving to New York, and I spent 15 years there. So I'm like 19, 20 years old when I moved. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to share with you all what I brought with me. So when I moved miles away from my upbringings and community, I bring with me these stack of photos. And as I was saying earlier to Mo, like these photos were taken in studios, and they were very, very common. Best friends would go, siblings would go here, boyfriends and girlfriends would go here and take these photos and then get like a stack of photos. Maybe we'll get like 80 copies each. And in the back, we would write like a note. And anyway, so I brought these with me. These are from the 90s, maybe from 94 to like 98. And I just, it was more like I had these materials to be able to reminisce and feel close to, with like my family and community. At the same time, I'm not calling home. I'm not engaging. I'm not communicating with my family at all. And because that's happening, I'm seeing this community, this world from the outside, because I'm also going online. I'm using the internet to read what's happening in Los Angeles. So everything that I'm learning is like I'm looking at material that doesn't really tell my story, if that makes sense. So, I'm like typing words on Google. I don't even know what to write, so I'm writing Latinos in LA or Chicana in LA and East or whatever. And there's like all these like stereotypes, the lowrider, the cholas and all this stuff. So then that is what makes me question the ways in which my community and also culture is being represented. Who's getting to tell these stories? So then I guess I would say maybe in 2012, I would say, I start calling home again. And I'm asking questions, and I call my sister for the first time and start having these conversations with her. I'm like asking her if simple questions, like, do you remember this party we went to when I was 15, or remember this person that we went to high school with? And this is already like 20 years, no, maybe 15 years, and of course she's like, oh yeah, that person got married and has kids, or this person moved, this person became an artist, this person is no longer here with us. And I'm starting to feel this like pull and also longing for like wanting to connect again, because I'm starting to feel this like distance between, like, I would say like time and space, because I'm so far away from LA, but also time is going by. This is like already 12 years, 13 years. And I've also noticed that even these conversations that I was having with friends and my sister when I was calling home, people started to forget information, like even like details of a party or details of a person, or I started noticing this like erasure, or even like physically, like the building is no longer there, where I went to, like where I hung out at. That store is now something else. So there's something about that made me sad, of course, because these were, I guess we would call them like stomping grounds. Like, this is where I socialized. This is where I bought my clothes. This is where I bought my groceries. This is where whatever was going on. But most specifically was, seeing Los Angeles, seeing these locations, seeing even like a telephone, a payphone, as relics. Like objects that could tell stories that mark a specific time and place in memory. So, seeing all these changes and reconnecting with family, I started really thinking about how I wanted to have these conversations with other people, not just like my own stories or my sisters, but a whole community. And how was I going to do that? You know, if I'm far away. So I was thinking about social media a lot. Like, okay, well, that is something that we have access to. I have these photos that I can share with people. Maybe I can start a conversation where people start sharing their photographs, their archives, and we tell a story together collectively. So in 2015, I started these 2 Instagram projects. One is called Veteranas and Rucas, and the other one's Map Points. And I'll get to why there are 2 and what the differences are. But when I started Veteranas and Rucas, and I kept that very specific, but at the same time very hybrid, because the hybrid part was more about being open to discussion. Like, how do we frame our experiences? How do we talk about our past? How do we relate to it? How do we describe ourselves? So I started posting my own photos, my own archives, and started sharing my own story. So it was about like storytelling, but the photos were almost like what activated these conversations or these stories. And I made it public. I invited others to contribute, to share their own stories and photos. And I would say that in the first week, I must have gotten like 100 photos. And the reason why is because the way I was telling stories, it was almost like humanizing. People were able to relate. And then people wanted to do the same. So, Veteranas and Rucas grew really fast. Can't remember the numbers, but something that I realized was that we were all amplifying each other's voices. And that was really important, because it was important for us to reframe our own histories through that. And I guess going back to my cousin's death and the people I've lost in my life, I think about this a lot. Like my first experience with collective healing, like my dealing with grief and with that kind of pain at a very young age. We don't have resources. We don't know like who to go to, therapy, or any of this stuff, especially when we're surrounded by it. Again, violence was really, it was hard to escape that in the 90s in LA. And the work that I'm doing now is actually taught me how to like reflect back and look at what I had. Collective healing started at home. I remember this very clearly. When my cousin passed away, people were coming to my house to share stories about him, to be in silence together, and really like support each other through that grief. And that's similar to what the work is doing. Like it's we're able to reminisce and celebrate, but we're also able to share stories that are difficult. And when we do that, we don't feel alone. And that's been my experience. even when I was living in New York, I remember, like living there, I had a completely different community there. And I remember just wanting to share my story, but I didn't know how, because I felt like, well, they're not going to understand. And there was also some maybe like shame, like growing up in the hood and being exposed to a lot of things, and how do I talk about it? And this work is what it has allowed me and empowered me to be able to talk about it. Now, when we talk about art making, I'm really interested in thinking about archives beyond the physical, like the objects, the photos. I'm really interested in seeing ourselves as like these almost like capsules that hold memory, that hold emotions, that our bodies are archives. And when I say that, it can go as far as like, how do we feel when we look at color even, what does it bring back? How does it affect our bodies? And that's the kind of work that I make in let's say we talk about galleries or institutions. I'm really I'm really interested in transforming spaces for that reason. Like we could look at photographs and activate sensation and memories, but our bodies can also do that. An example would be how our bodies feel, how our skin feels when we listen to music. Like I think a lot of us have gotten like goosebumps when we listen to a song or like a beat. We're like, man, that feels so good. It's like that same thing. There's a reason why that happens. So I guess like that is something that I'm working on, in the studio. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I moved back to LA because of the work. Like I was having these conversations with people through social media, through emails, and I was really connecting. People were opening up, and I was doing the same thing. And I've also reconnected with childhood friends, like I was in some ways searching for them, and I ended up finding them. And unfortunately, there were also people that I couldn't for various reasons. So I ended up moving back to LA, and I've been here since 2016. And the work has also grown in ways that are back to the physical, like we're talking about social media where people are digitizing and submitting photos, but now people are donating materials. So now I have this archive that I'm taking care of in my studio. I have magazines, I have photos. People have even donated clothing, which is beautiful, because this experience that I've had when I meet the person or the people, I've also noticed this like intimacy that happens, not just like our conversations, but even when people come and drop off the boxes of like flyers or clothing, like I can smell their home. I can smell like what what their house smells like, what their garage smells like, and that is part of it, And the other thing about that too is that I have this sweatshirt that was given to me from a party crew. A party crew was groups of teenagers that got together back in the 90s, organized parties, and by organizing, I mean we made our own flyers, we had our own style, we had our own DJs, and we looked for spaces, whether they were backyards or abandoned warehouses. And that was like, I would say maybe back in the day was like a safe space, but of course, sometimes they weren't that safe. But we were always trying to carve something new. And this is all before the internet, obviously. And what was I going to say about this sweatshirt? So the sweatshirt was given to me by a mother that lost her son back in '96. And she comes to me, she's like, oh, Lupe, here's the sweatshirt that, it was Anthony's sweatshirt, his party crew sweatshirt. And it says his crew name, which is Swing Kids. And he's like, oh, but I haven't washed it, And I was like, you don't have to do that. And there's like literally dirt on it because he was a break dancer. So it was like dirt on the sleeves and on the front. And I told her, like, I'll keep it this way, And that's what I mean, that it's these objects are relics, because it's almost like they traveled in time. And even that smell that I was talking about, it's familiar, it's traveling. So hopefully by next year I have a running space. I mean, considering everything else that we're dealing with COVID and all that, but what I want to do is open up a space where people can like come and look at the archive. Let me see if I have any photos of the material here. Actually, before I go into that, I wanted to share some photos that I've been taking since I came back. I started, here we go. Can you guys see that? Okay. So when I came back to LA, I went back. So my parents don't live in East LA anymore. They ended up moving out of East LA, but I always go there, and I started documenting and taking photos of my neighborhood. And a lot of these places still look the same and they evoke the same feelings, that I remember that I had when I was running, around when I was 15, 16. This particular photograph is a shortcut between the main street where you see there's a car here, that's a street here. And the photo was taken from the alleyway. And when I took this photo, I was like on the phone with my sister and I said to her, like, hey, remember that shortcut that connected the alleyway to the main street? And we started talking about it. And this particular shortcut was, which I've also shared on my Instagram page, a lot of people started talking about like, oh yeah, like I remember like I would take that shortcut to go to my friend's house. Or if the cops were chasing us, like we'll run around and like lose them because we knew the ways and how, like we knew the city, And this is what it meant to me. Like we knew the city really well, It's like part of us. And So what I've been doing now is documenting, taking photos of this neighborhood. One second. It's a little pixelated, but I hope you guys can see this. These are all flyers. These are actual flyers that are in the archive. And for a show a few years ago, I recreated a teenage bedroom. And this is what we did back in the day. You know, we decorated, we made our own wallpaper with flyers. And I ended up placing or pinning these flyers on a wall, almost like this color wheel. Yeah, and this is what we did. Like, we got really creative. I remember going to a friend's house as a teenager, and he had his entire bedroom covered. But the way he did it, he was like, I have all black and white on all four walls and color in the ceiling. So, you know. Just going through photos right now because I don't really have them in a slide or let's see. One second. So I've also started making sculptures. And going back to what I was saying about seeing our bodies as archives, I'm also thinking of ways in making work around that. And what I've been doing and really interested in is how we socialize. I mean, I guess things have changed because of COVID, but when we think about our sweat, you know, bodily fluids, things that we release, whether, you know, it's like crying or laughing or dancing, I really wanted to bring that into my work. And I started making these go-go pedestal boxes and inviting performers to collaborate with artists who I have close relationships with. You know, one artist in particular was who I worked with was Rafa Esparza, my friend Mariana Valencia, and we talked about, you know, the archive and how to activate it. And Rafa Esparza made a performance here last year in New York, and we talked about grief, you know, and my cousin's passing, and he made work around that. And he activated this box. Now, the design of this box is in some ways very hybrid, you know, like it says forever in our hearts, which is this sticker that people put in their cars, letterings that people wear on their shirts when someone dies. And I was also thinking about like the lowrider culture, you know, like these objects or these sculptures that are in the city and that are also art. So I really wanted to like play with that idea. This is another photograph of East LA that I took, and this is actually across the street from the house that I lived in. This picture was taken in 2018, and when I went there, I had this feeling that it's like, man, it looks the same. But then at the same time, LA is changing so much. So there's like all these pockets, right? Like untouched. But then all these other areas are completely different, which is also another question, like, why does that happen, you know? I think we have 20 minutes, right? Or 5 minutes or so. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it here, and just leave it open for questions. I know that there was a lot of material that I just showed. Yeah, go ahead and ask whatever you guys want.
Well, I have a question, but I'm not sure. Lisa, are you gonna ask the questions from the students from KSMoCA, or can just anyone step in?
Thank you, Carlos. That's a great question. After Guadalupe finishes presenting, we'll start with the questions from the KSMoCA students, which I'll place in the chat. And then after those questions have been answered, we can open it up to questions from anybody. So we'll go for about 5 more minutes, Guadalupe, for your presentation, if that works for you, till about 10:45, then we can switch to questions.
Sure, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and share. I'm hoping I have photos of the archive. 1 second. Okay, here we go. So this is the physical archive. This is I have about 2 boxes of Teen Angel magazines. These were magazines similar to, I guess I would say that a lot of people had, you know, compared the work that I do with these magazines. these magazines were publications that came out, I think, in the 70s or early 80s, and people would submit photos and dedications to these magazines. And then, but it was like very, very like, you have to send the actual photo to teen angels, mail it in an envelope, and send your dedication. And then they would post it, they would like print it in this magazine, and then they would send you the photo back. It was that style, which is like with veteranas and rucas and map points, people just DM me the photos or email me the photos. Then again, the archive that I'm running, the physical archive, people are literally leaving and giving me photo albums and magazines and clothing. And these are magazines that were donated to the archive. You saw these photos. This is inside of the magazine. I don't know if you guys can see that. The magazine on the left was a magazine that was put out by Aperture Foundation. And these are all pages from a photo album. From 1994, I believe. And these are all prison letters, and these are all personal. These are all mine here that my mom kept, actually. So when I left and then came back 15 years later, my mom still had a shoebox full of letters and photos of mine. And I mean, I have a lot of them. It's you know, from like people that I went to prison. Just gonna scroll through real quickly here. Let's see. Can you see this? Okay. This is the photo album. All candid photos that were taken in the high school, parties, someone's house, just hanging out. Trinity perfume or cologne. That was very, very popular back in the day, including Cool Waters and CK1, maybe some sunflower. Okay, I think we're done. I'm open to questions. Thank you so much, Carlos. Thanks to everyone that invited me to be in conversation with you all. It's really strange to talk on a computer, like not hear the audience, but I guess we're getting used to it. Thank you so much. I do see a question here. So do I just say the question and answer?
That would be great, Guadalupe. And I'll just kind of feed the questions to you. So these are all from Mr. Caldwell's 4th grade students. And the first question is from Aljanae.
So Aljanae is asking, where do you come up with the ideas of your artwork? So I guess what I was saying earlier, even when I think back, the photos that I was showing you of those night photos, like when I take these photos, I have to be connected with that time, and I have to be connected with the landscape. How do I capture that moment? And that is how it's not really coming up with ideas, but it's more like, okay, I want to be present, and I want the photo to capture what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing right now. Because I want to share this moment with people, and I want this photo to capture a time and place, and also evoke feelings. And that is probably the most challenging thing to do as an artist, but it's also very, very satisfying when you get it right. It brings a lot of happiness. And especially when I get these photos back, because all these photographs I'm using film cameras. So there's a whole process. You take the photo, you don't know what it came out like, you develop it, and then you look at it like a week later, and then you scan it, and then you're like either excited or disappointed. And that's part of it. And then you go back if you're not happy with it. You go back, but I'm also a person that pays attention to weather. Is it cold out? Is it hot out? What color is the sky? Am I going to be able to capture the cold in this photograph? Because that's also really important for me. Norma is asking, how did I become an artist? I like to say that I always felt that I was an artist, because I want to say when I was a teenager, maybe like 14, 15, I was always very imaginative. I was doing everything that everyone else was doing, in my community, like my sisters and my friends were going to parties, but I was always paying detail, like attention to things. And for a long time, I was like, wait, why? People probably thought that I was kind of spacey, not present, but I was. And that is what I bring into my art now. Something that I remind myself of is being conscious and what's the word that I'm looking for? Intentional with the work that I do. And that is being an artist for me. Art, I guess being an artist doesn't mean I'm just going to paint and put it in a show. It's about wrestling with ideas, with frustrations, questioning myself, why am I doing this? Or not settling for the mediocre. Whatever feels like unfinished, it's like, no, there's actually, I need to keep pushing myself. And I would say that that's where I'm at right now in the studio. I actually went back when I was living in New York before this archive project that I've been sharing with you all. I was doing a lot of geometric drawings, and I can actually share those with you. And I've started going back to those, and I have to say that it's really difficult, because this is the kind of work that I was doing maybe 2012. And of course, like we lose practice, right? Like we need to start again, or at least I do. Where is it? This is the kind of work that I was doing in 2011, 2012. But it was like, it was still connected to photography, but it's also because I was really looking at memory in a different way. But I was always interested in like memory as something complex, you know, like layers, experiences, like the way we talk, you know, like this multi-dimensional experience. And that is something that has always been in my work. But now what I'm doing is that I'm bringing this older work with the work that I'm doing now. And it's a really big challenge, but I'm actually really curious to see what that's going to look like. So this piece here that I'm sharing with you all is, it's large scale. It's about 5 feet. It's about maybe 48 wide, and I can't remember the height. And it's charcoal, graphite, and spray paint, and folded multiple times. And it almost resembles this bandana, but it's also a lot what I was just describing, the folds, this conversation around memory, things that we forget and then come back. And this was a work in response to that. I'm going to go back to the next question. Nate wants to know, do I have any pets? Well, I used to have a dog. His name was Santos, but he wanted to stay in New York when I left. When I came back to LA, he wanted to stay in New York, and he's with a family, with a close friend of mine. But my partner has a dog. So right now I don't have any pets. How do you pronounce her name? Or their name?
I think it's DeAndre. Or DeAndre.
DeAndre. Why did you want to become an artist? And how did you get so good at art? That's very sweet. I became an artist. I guess you say I started taking my art practice more seriously because I felt I started seeing that art can challenge the world and ask questions that can be very difficult. I could be myself. You know, I think also art has helped me embrace myself even, and not just about being a person of color, but also as a queer artist, as being queer. It has given me a community where I can be myself, be open. And how did I get so good at art? Practice. I mean, I'm still struggling. Sometimes I question myself, but I think that questioning is what makes you a good artist. Thanks for the compliment, though. Tasha, how did you come up with ideas for what to draw or create? I read a lot. I think a lot. I experiment a lot in the studio. I'm reading a lot right now. I actually just got this book, The Purpose of Power by Alicia Garza. There's a quote in here that really resonated. She's one of the co-founders for Black Lives Matter. And she mentions hashtags don't start movements, people do. And that is something that really, I can relate to that, especially with the work that I'm doing. You know, like the work that exists on Instagram or on social media didn't start there, you know, like this is work that people have been building, community has, and this is community driven. How did I mean, I guess I'm going back to this question, right? How did I come up with ideas? I think that as an artist, it is about that. It is about coming up with ideas. I always tell, I also teach, and I tell my students that becoming an artist is not about finding the answers or a solution to things. You know, like what's really interesting about art is where you can keep exploring. Like there's almost like no end to that. Which colors do you use for your art, Justin? I use different colors, but I love using light in my work, and I will show you a photo right now. The last color I used was green, and I will show you a photo of that. You see that? So this color, there's an exhibition in Mexico. And as I mentioned before, I create these immersive installations. And these are all flyers from the archive. And I made this pyramid shape. And how I chose the color was the night before I flew out to Mexico to install the show. I was driving in LA, and it had been raining that week. And I was thinking about, I guess, like voyeurism, you know, like surveillance, and it's at night. And that same night, you know, it must have been like 11 o'clock at night. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in LA, when there's no traffic, the lights stay on green. So, you know, it's just, and then the whole city looks green. And that was my experience that night. You know, the ground was wet, the city was empty, it had just rained, and there's no traffic. And I just saw the whole street just green. And that's how I made my decision. And that's how I chose this color.
Guadalupe, thank you so much for your presentation and your time today. That's the conclusion of our lecture series for this term. Again, thanks so much to our Dr. MLK Jr. students who've been joining us via the YouTube live stream. And we will be in touch with an updated schedule for next year, which will begin in January.
you'll have an opportunity to deepen your understanding of the 8 artists in residence that we've invited to work with us this year. So to everybody there and everybody who's joined us on the Zoom today, thank you very much to Carlos and the SP program for inviting Guadalupe. And make sure to check out her archives on Instagram, and you can check us out at KSMoCA.